Hey everybody, my name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and I figured out how to implement the GraphQL API in Solid Start, so I started to do a video on it. Okay, it's pretty simple, and again, the code will be committed in the repo in this for this, but I'll also make maybe a GitHub gist for a quick reference. Okay, but essentially, basically, what you have to do is you actually have to install GraphQL. So you have to install the GraphQL library, okay? Because essentially what happens, like that example code that's in the documentation is just sort of an example, is a very loose example of what you would do. So it took me a second to realize that, so then I backed into it. But essentially what you do is you use this GraphQL library, okay? And then what's going to happen is that you would pass your schema out to this build schema function. So this would build your GraphQL schema, okay? Then you would pass all your resolvers, so all the functions that would handle the different requests here. Okay, so here's your, under a variable called root value. Okay, it has to have that name. I mean, you could call it something else, but you'll see like eventually you have to call it root value. Okay, and then what I did is I created this handler function. I call it GraphQL handler, which basically what it does, it's going to grab the body. Okay, basically going to grab the body as text. Because generally what's going to happen is that you're sending in a text string that's going to be parsed. So in this case, you really want to get the body as a text string, not as a JSON object. Okay. And this just console logs this. That was just me making sure that it worked. And then what you do is you call the GraphQL function. Okay. And you need to pass it inside of an object. So keep in mind, like, see, I have these three properties tucked away in this object. There's the root value, that again, those are going to be the resolver. So those are the functions that it knows, okay, hey, you asked for this, so I'm going to run this function. It has the schema, okay, which is going to be sort of like the definition of those different queries and mutations you can do. Okay, and then you have the source, which is going to be the query itself. So that's the string from the body. Okay, and then basically what I do is I just return the result as JSON. Okay, and then I attach that to the get and post handlers. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is that when I do a post there, it'll just go through the motions of doing all this. So basically now, if I head over to Insomnia, okay, and I do this hello query, okay, and I say, hey, okay, hello, and again, the way I have it defined right now, hello is an object with a property called message. If I hit post, okay, see, I get back syntax error name found string query. Okay, that might be the body. Like I had this working just a second ago, but that was before because I actually hard coded the query here. So just to show you that it works. If I were to do this, message hello, and then say, hey, I want the message property from that hello object. Okay, you'll see that this actually like works. So let me just do that real quick first. So let me just hit post again. And you see I get back the data. So you get back this is essentially the result object. And you see it's like data, hello, so forth, so forth. Okay. So that would be the result of the query. And then again, if you had done multiple queries, they would show up under the name of each one. If you use GraphQL, you wouldn't be familiar with how that's going to get returned. If you haven't used GraphQL before, then watch my intro to GraphQL videos. This is not meant to be that, just to show you how to set up GraphQL from solid start. So basically, I need to make sure that I'm passing that string accurately. Okay, so hello. So let me just do this. I think actually what I do want to actually get this as JSON because I don't think it's going to. Let's just take a look. Console.log body. Let's just confirm what am I getting as the body. Okay, so let me hit post on Insomnia. Yeah, so I'm getting that as the body. So really, technically, what I want to do is pass body.query as the source here. So body.query. Okay, so that's technically what I want to do there. Okay, and now let's try this again. So now if I go to Insomnia and I pass this hello message, that works. And now let's see here. I also created another query called goodbye, just as a test. So again, I can change my GraphQL query and say, hey, I want to run the goodbye query. And it works. And it gives me back the goodbye query. So there you go. I now have this endpoint working as a GraphQL API from Solid. Okay, so essentially you can implement that GraphQL API. But again, theme that may not be immediately clear when you read the documentation is that for the GraphQL and TRPC endpoints, it's not necessarily like built in. It's not like something like the GraphQL library, the TRPC library aren't nested inside SolidStart. You have to install those, and you're using those external libraries. But essentially, all you're doing is you're just setting up an API endpoint that is configured with those libraries to create those kinds of APIs, and it's just showing you, hey, that's possible. Okay, so as you can see, it really wasn't that hard to create a GraphQL endpoint that works alongside my REST endpoints, that works alongside all my routes. I can do all that from here. Okay, and then again, I can get deeper and deeper and deeper. So like so for those not familiar with like GraphQL, again, you get this like object here. So we'll just say, hey, like stuff. We'll call it stuff, and we'll just console log stuff. So you can see, hey, what do you get every time one of these resolvers get called? Okay, and then I'm gonna go over here. Let's call hello again. Hello. Get the message property from the hello object. Okay, and then let's take a look over here. Well, in this case, you get nothing because there's no arguments. But, you know, I could have gone over here and said, hey, like hello has one argument, which we'll call input, which is a string. Okay. So now if that's the case, actually let me do this. Args. I think that's more what I want to do. Nope, not there. Call this args. And then let's grab all the arguments. I always forget if it's one argument, if it's one object that has like 4 different properties, or if it's just 4 arguments. I think it's the latter, so I'm going to do that. Okay, and let's see here. If I then hit this again. Okay, yeah, so you see you're getting these things in there. So like the first thing is an empty object. That, if I remember right, is the parent. So essentially, if this is a child resolver, so like if this function is being called because you called a different query, so it's like a subquery in a sense, this would have the information from like the parent object. This second argument, I think that's the arguments object. Okay, this field name message, undefined. I forget what the other two. One of these is like the context and some other stuff. Okay, but let me actually pass an argument in the query. So let's see here. Let me go back to Insomnia, go back to hello here, and pass that argument I said that we could put input, which will be hello. Okay, and then we'll hit send. And now I should see that. Yep, see right there, that second argument. That second, oh, the first argument is the args argument. Okay, so the second one must be the parent. Okay, so the first one is args. So in that case, you know, if I wanted to get the arguments, so essentially what it would be like would be like, I think it's like args parent. I'm pretty sure context is the fourth one, and I always forget what the third one is off the top of my head. But the idea is, if you've done GraphQL, you have access to all that stuff there, and you can create your GraphQL API pretty simply just following this pattern. Okay. So again, I'm gonna commit this so that we have this for reference. But yeah, simple as that. And yeah, and then I'll eventually do another video where I'll do the TRPC implementation. But I just want to show you, like, if you wanted to do the GraphQL implementation, this is how you would do it. Okay, so again, you need to install the GraphQL library. You can import build schema on GraphQL. You're going to build your schema under a variable named schema. You're going to build all your resolvers under a variable called root value. Okay, then you're going to create the handler, which basically what it does, it's going to grab the request body, pass the query along as the source property in this argument to the GraphQL function. We'll await the GraphQL function to get back the result, and then we just send back the results. And then there you go. Okay, and then you can just set that handler for your get and post requests. Okay, although typically you're using like something like, by default, generally a GraphQL query is going to be a post request. Okay, generally you're posting that string, and then that gets passed to the GraphQL function, and then you get back your result as you see here. But there you go. I've created a GraphQL API in that one endpoint. And again, I can clean this up and say, hey, you know, instead of having to define all my resolvers here, define them in an external folder. So this way, this ends up becoming a little cleaner. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. My name is um, Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Okay, and then again, the next piece would then you have to create like a client to do those. Although, not too hard. You could, you could just always just use fetch requests to do your GraphQL calls. You would just pass the string as a property called query. Okay, so it's all, you don't necessarily have to go install something like Apollo client or whatnot, but you can if you want. However you prefer to do your GraphQL. So I'll leave it at that. I'll see y'all later on.